Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you failed to deny the conclusion that you would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So let me be direct. Given what we are seeing across the country right now, would you carry out or issue an order by the president for our military to fire upon protesters actively engaging in their civil right to exercise free speech, the First Amendment rights? Would you give that order from the president?
I assume you're insinuating what's going on in Los Angeles, and I wouldn't.
Not just Los Angeles. If you take a look at protests throughout the country, it's a simple question. If directed by the president, would you order our military to fire upon protesters? Simple yes or no.
Ma'am, we have, as you know, and as this committee knows, we have standard rules of engagement that are in place that give guidance to our troops, and they abide by them.
I'm asking what you would do. Again, you said you serve at the pleasure of the president. Is that not true?
I do serve at the
So if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as well in your confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Jill Tokuda doesn't ask hypotheticals for sport. She asks because history already tested us once. And when she presses Pete Hegseth on whether the military could be ordered to fire on Americans, his refusal to answer speaks louder than any yes or no ever could.
Here now recognizes the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Tokuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree we've had many performances today, but what we'd like is some answers. Mr. Secretary, did you invite Elon Musk for a briefing on war plans with China to the Pentagon? Yes or no is simple.
There's been a lot of hyperbole and incorrect reporting around that situation, but we did invite Elon over to come talk to us generally, but there was no war plans being discussed.
Okay, so whose idea was it to invite him to the Pentagon for a briefing? You mentioned you served at the pleasure of the president. Was it the president's will to have him come and be briefed?
Well, as you know, at that time, Elon Musk was leading up DOGE efforts, and we've taken a great investment in DOGE at DOD, and so getting his input on how we make DOD more efficient makes a great deal of sense.
Okay, but don't you think it's a conflict of interest for the world's richest man? Many of the contracts that the DOD is engaged in, billions of dollars of contracts going to his company, and he is, as to your point, was leading DOGE, which was involved in cutting hundreds of contracts, but also becoming intimately aware of the platforms and the requirements that would be given out for new contracts. Did you not think it was a conflict of interest to invite someone with financial interests into the Pentagon to have firsthand knowledge of what they could then bid on for their own, enrichment?
Ma'am, it was just an informal discussion, but I'll tell you, anyone that knows our Defense Department knows we show no preference to any company other than what your capabilities are, and we're grateful for the places where his companies benefit our national defense.
So for a $280 million donation, the world's richest man with companies intimately linked and involved in billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense gain access into the Pentagon. So would you say that any company right now that has multi-billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense has access to the Pentagon right now? 1-hour briefings with you personally?
On the regular
I think the
basis,
answer
I
is
meet with many people and many different companies and many different aspects of our defense industrial base to ensure we have the best possible capabilities. It would be imprudent to do
Well, I'm
otherwise.
sure for an investment of $280 million, Elon's investors are quite happy that it's come out into the billions. I want to jump questions right now. Mr. Secretary, on January 6, 2021, rioters and looters attacked federal law enforcement officials, vandalized and destroyed federal government property, and caused an estimated $2.7 billion in damages right here at the Capitol. Would you have sent the National Guard and the Marines in on that day?
Well, unfortunately, President Trump requested the National Guard in advance, and that was...
It took him quite a long time. I'm asking you, as Secretary of Defense, would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day? We had 140 Capitol Police officers injured. One died the next day. Would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines?
As I said, President Trump directed National Guard to be there in advance.
And I think you can look at the record of how long it actually took for him to actually send them in. But it's good to hear that it sounds like you would have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day in which the insurrection was taking place right here at the Capitol. Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you failed to deny the conclusion that you would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So let me be direct. Given what we are seeing across the country right now, would you carry out or issue an order by the president for our military to fire upon protesters actively engaging in their civil right to exercise free speech, their First Amendment rights? Would you give that order from the president?
I assume you're insinuating what's going on in Los Angeles, and I wouldn't.
Not just Los Angeles. If we take a look at protests throughout the country, it's a simple question. If directed by the president, would you order our military to fire upon protesters? Simple yes or no.
Ma'am, we have, as you know, And as this committee knows, we have standard rules of engagement that are in place that give guidance to our troops, and they abide by them.
I'm asking what you would do. Again, you said you serve at the pleasure of the president. Is that not true?
I do serve at the
So
pleasure.
if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as only a confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Because I refuse to accept a false hypothetical that's attempting to put me in a corner and make it look like a
At
representative.
a time when we have more Marines and
standard
National
rules of
Guard in
engagement
Los
and they are
Angeles than
followed.
we do in Syria and Iran alone, I don't think this is a hypothetical. This is an actual situation that we are dealing with right now. So again, I will ask the question, the last 14 seconds I have, would you order our military to shoot at their fellow countrymen if ordered by the president?
I think it's interesting that for 4 years, insurrection was the left's
I think we
favorite
know your
word.
answer. Thank you, Mr.
And that
Chair. I
was
yield back.
invoked in L.A. They were
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady's time's expired.
This exchange is not about gotcha questions, and it's not about theatrics. It's about the most dangerous gray area in a democracy. What happens when civilian power meets military force, and the person in charge won't clearly draw the line? Representative Jill Tokuda begins where accountability should always start: conflicts of interest. She asks why the world's richest man, whose companies receive billions in Defense Department contracts, was invited into the Pentagon. Pete Hegseth tries to wave it away as informal, as efficiency, as just another conversation. But Tokuda's point isn't procedural, it's structural. Access is power. Information is power. And when someone with massive financial stakes is granted inside access, the public has every right to question whether national defense decisions are being shaped by public interest or private enrichment. Then the hearing pivots, sharply, from money to force. Tokuda brings the conversation to January 6th, not as a rhetorical weapon, but as a stress test. On that day, federal officers were attacked, injured, and overwhelmed at the seat of American government. She asks a simple question: would you have sent in the National Guard and Marines? Hegseth doesn't give a clear answer. He deflects to process. He points backward. He avoids ownership. And that avoidance matters, because what comes next is the question that freezes the room. Tokuda reminds him that during his confirmation hearing, he failed to deny that he would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So she strips the question down to its core. No hypotheticals, no politics, no spin. If the president ordered you to fire on Americans exercising their First Amendment rights, would you do it? This is where democratic clarity is supposed to live, but instead of a boundary, Americans hear evasion. Instead of a firm no, they hear talk of rules of engagement. Instead of moral clarity, they hear institutional language. And that's the problem. Rules don't protect democracy if leaders won't say when they would refuse an illegal or immoral order. Procedures don't matter if obedience overrides judgment. Tokuda presses because she understands something fundamental. Democracies don't collapse all at once. They erode when power becomes ambiguous, when accountability is avoided, and when force is normalized as a response to dissent. Her question isn't extreme. History shows exactly why it's necessary. By the end, Hegseth still hasn't answered, and in moments like this, silence isn't neutrality, it's a signal. When leaders can't say they would refuse to harm their own people, the public has every reason to worry about where the lines actually are. This isn't about left versus right. It's about whether the military exists to defend the Constitution or to obey whoever happens to be in office. If this exchange unsettled you, it should. And if you believe elected officials and cabinet members should be able to clearly say no to unlawful violence, then the public needs to keep watching, questioning, and demanding answers, because democracy doesn't survive on trust alone. It survives on accountability.